12 books of the Bible. Now we've read through Genesis and Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, right? These Mosaic laws, the Torah. And then a bunch of stuff that comes after that that is not the Torah. That is not considered by Jewish tradition to be divinely inspired, but by our tradition is, right? And
we finished out the law, and now we're talking about the history.
Yeah.
So we're in the book of history, and as we mentioned last time, history, it's written kind of repetitive. So First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles are going to say a lot of the same things. Mm-hmm. A lot of the same characters are going to show up.
Yeah.
And for Second Kings, I didn't keep track of each of the individual kings as they came up, because some of them they served for like 3 months.
Yeah.
And they were going pretty fast through the kings for some of them, but good portions of Second King are kind of enjoyable reading.
Yeah, First and Second Samuel and First and Second Kings are in some of the more Eastern traditions. First, Second, Third, and Fourth Kings, and they're all written in the same style, with the same focus, right? Where the focus is very much on God and what he's doing, what he approves of, what he disapproves of, the things he likes, the things he dislikes. And unfortunately for the people of Israel, it's mostly dislikes.
Correct. Having read through Second Kings today, I scratch my head and go, how many good kings were there? And, there were only 2 really good kings.
Yeah.
Hezekiah and Josiah.
Right. Even, Josiah, it says there was no king as good as him before him or after him.
Right.
So for somehow David gets touted as this king, this great king, a man after God's own heart. But a few generations down comes Josiah, who is this, apparently greater king that, I guess maybe because he was raised up in sort of an evil household, that it became an easier thing for God to say, wow, this guy grew up bad, and then once he became king, was penitent.
And one of the things we don't see, we have a lot more of the history of David, so we have a lot more chance to see his mistakes. Mm-hmm. And Josiah doesn't take up that much of the book of Second Kings. So what the language is for him, it doesn't have a lot of room for, and by the way, he slept with his neighbor's wife or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is more romantic history, where it's talking about the deeds of people and how it affected things, not as much like a list of all the actions that people took or all the kids they had or anything.
Well, you say it's romantic history. I'd say for most of the kings, it's more erotic history.
Yeah.
It's romantic without the man.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so we start off with Elijah and Elisha, 2 best friend prophets with similarly sounding names, and they are 2 of the greatest people of our faith, right?
Yep.
That they, Elijah is known as this guy who has great spirit from the Lord and does these great miracles, and Elisha doubles it.
Right.
He doubles it and gives it to the next guy, right? So
it does open with a few interesting scenes of Elijah. The king is going to send for Elijah the Tishbite again, and he wants the king wants Elijah to come and talk to him, and he sends 3 groups of 50 men. Yeah. And Elijah says, "Hey, if I'm a man of God, may fire come down from heaven and consume you." And he does this twice. And the third leader comes with his 50 men and says, value my life. Could you listen to me? He recognizes that Elijah has this kind of peculiar power.
Yeah.
And he's not afraid to use it.
Yeah. From this, I mean, Elijah is this man of power that it seems like he understands God's heart and understands what God would respond to people. That what we see later on even is the way God responds to people. Like, am I really your God? Like, right. Are you really offering sacrifices to me? Like, if I am, then why aren't you following all the rules? Why aren't you coming with a humble heart?
Exactly.
And so that's what this third captain does, right? It's the way he does it is more correct. He says that he's not coming, to command this man of God, but to beg this man of God with humbleness in his heart, with fear for the Lord. Please, can you just come do this thing that I've been charged to do? I want to be obedient, and being obedient is asking you to come. But I also don't really want to die.
Right. So after chapter 1, Elijah gets taken up to heaven, and Elisha takes his place as the prophet of Israel.
Yeah, I love this story. It is maybe my favorite Bible story, because Elijah says, like, okay, you wait here. I'm just going to go, like, verse 1, the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind. And they're walking together. And Elijah tells Elisha, like, okay, you just stay here, and I'm just going to go on ahead. And I love the love that Elisha has for him, and the way that Elisha wants to serve with him, the way that Elisha knows what's coming, and he isn't trying to stop it from coming necessarily. He just wants to be there when it happens.
He wants to stick with Elijah to the very end.
Yeah.
And he does. And the people of the men, the other prophets that observed that this was happening, when Elisha comes back alone, they said, let's go search for Elijah. Elisha says, no need to. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And they press him and they make him feel guilty. And he says, all right, go ahead. Mm-hmm. And guess what? They don't find him. Mm-hmm. And Elisha says, I told you so.
Yeah.
Because he knew that Elijah had gone up to heaven.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it says the sons of the prophets who were at Jericho saw him, but these same people had already talked to Elisha and said, don't you know that your master is going to be taken away by the Lord today? And Elisha says, I know, just be quiet about it. And, it's not a big deal. Yep. We don't have to tell everyone. And apparently they're so quiet about it that they forget that that's the thing that's happening.
Interesting thing, when Elijah gets taken up to heaven, he drops his cloak, and Elisha tears off his clothes and wears the cloak of Elijah.
Yeah.
So that becomes a powerful thing, because he takes that cloak when Elijah and Elisha were going. Elijah takes his cloak and puts it in the river, and the river parts, and you walk on dry land, something which we heard a few times in the Bible. And then on the way back, Elisha does the same thing.
Yeah.
The power of God shown to these two incredible prophets.
I wonder if this is the garment of hair. In chapter 1, they describe Elijah, and they describe him as he wears a garment of hair with a belt of leather about his waist. And the king knows, oh, of course, the only guy who would wear clothes like that's got to be Elijah. And, that's something that we see, much later on with John the Baptist, right?
Right.
He's described as this sort of prophet in the line of Elijah because of the way he wears clothes, and the way he's described as, this guy who's living off the land kind of in a crazy way.
Exactly. That's... there are some great similarities there.
And then we get the miracles of Elisha, which are all insane. Yep.
And, we often think, Elijah was this great prophet, and he did all these great things because of 1 Kings 17 through about 22, where he has these miraculous events.
And they are miraculous.
They are.
Revives a young boy. He makes plentiful food, makes plentiful oil.
Guess what Elisha does? Revives a boy.
Yeah.
Makes plentiful food, plentiful oil.
But he does it better somehow.
Yeah, it's more oil. Remember in 2 Kings, Elisha has a woman. There's a famine, and he goes to a woman whose son he's ultimately going to raise from the dead, and she's out of oil. And he says, go borrow containers from all your neighbors and take what little oil you left and pour it in those containers. And it's enough oil to pay off all her debts and for her and her son to survive through the end of the famine.
Now, these are actually two different women. You said that that's the same woman whose son is raised, but this is just a poor widow who her oil is plentified. and it saves them from all their debts. And then after that, Elisha goes to Shunem and meets
Okay.
a wealthy Shunammite woman.
Yes, I stand corrected. I sit corrected.
Mm-hmm.
I hate doing that. Yeah, so Elisha does. I mean, it's an amazing section of scripture. If you are only going to read a short portion of Second Kings, I say read from the beginning through let's say chapter
8, maybe.
Chapter 7, maybe chapter 8.
At this point, Elisha's not really doing much after chapter 8.
Yeah, and just amazing miracles showing the incredible power of God. And like I said, if you want to see how God worked in miraculous ways through Elisha, that is a beautiful passage to read.
I think there are a lot of things that, to me, show the heart of God, too, in the way that Elisha interacts with people, the way that he performs these miracles. I think, people joke about this story of, I joke about it too, because it's a silly story, right? Elisha is walking, and some small boys come out of the city. That's how it describes them. Some small boys come out of the city and jeer at him.
Go up, you bald head, go up.
Yeah, and he turns around, he sees them and curses them in the name of the Lord. And 2 bears come out, and they tear up 42 of them. And it's just like this short throwaway thing. It's 3 verses. And it's also the heart of God, right? Where it's like if you curse and make fun of God and you jeer at him, he might just look at you and curse you.
Yep.
And
or fire might come down from heaven.
Yeah.
Or bears might come.
Yeah, and it's not because God is this evil God. It's not because he's some angry God, but it's out of like the holiness that God is that he can't be disrespected. And
Yes.
when that disrespect comes towards him, it's, I find myself hard pressed to say that it's an intentional cursing, but that it's that sort of way, that sin can't be in the presence of God. And because of that, it just burns away in the fire. Like we saw with Moses, where Moses' face becomes shiny and all the people of Israel hide Moses' face because they don't want that light of God to burn them.
Yep.
It's that same way that it seems like in this so much Elisha just has these what seem like very emotional responses, but they're not counted against him as wrong. They're counted towards him as positive miracles.
Yeah.
Where it just seems like that's how God works too, that things can seem emotional or seem they're easy to misunderstand, but it's still like this place of love, this place of justice.
Yeah, and I really like the message of chapter 5. Chapter 5 is where Naaman is the leper, and his king sends to the king of Israel and says, you should be able to heal us. The king says, who am I, God, to kill and to make alive, that this man is sending word to me to cure a man of leprosy? And then Elisha comes and sends word to Naaman and says, go wash yourself in the Jordan 7 times, which of course was insulting to Naaman, because he says, well, why can't I just wash in my own rivers? And ultimately, one of his servants says, if God had asked you a difficult thing, you would have done it. But this simple thing, you resist. And I think that is something that happens to us. God asks us some very simple things, and we disobey. We don't do it. And sometimes we ought to just do the simple thing that God asks us to do.
Yeah.
Then again, chapter 6.
Yeah, I mean, I like that Naaman is willing to be like listening to his servant, and also that God is still willing to bless Naaman in the face of like his initial response is this anger and why would I do this? I have my own rivers I could wash in.
Yeah. And then chapter 6, we have another axe head that goes flying away.
Yeah.
Man, they just didn't do a good job making axes back then.
Yeah, apparently not.
This one falls into the lake, and
yeah, and I like the man's question towards Elisha. He says, "I borrowed this axe. I want to give it back. I can't if there's no axe head. That'd be a terrible way to borrow something." And Elisha does the funniest miracle. He takes a stick, throws it in the river, and for whatever reason, the axe head, was able to float.
Yep.
I mean, the reason is God, right?
Yeah.
But
And he says, "You take it up.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is." So Elisha, the miracles of Elisha, pretty amazing, pretty cool stories that can warm the cockles of your heart.
Mm-hmm. I like this story of the horses and chariots of fire, where Elisha is in a camp, and at this point, Gehazi, his servant that gets named at least, has been turned away for being kind of a greedy jerk.
Right.
And so Elisha has these other servants that are with him, and they're staying in camp, and they get surrounded by the king of Syria and all of the king's men. And I just love this prayer. The servant says, "Alas, my master, what shall we do? Things are so bad. We're surrounded by our enemies." And Elisha says, "Don't be afraid. There are more with us than are with them." And the servant, he knows that they're a small camp.
Right.
And Elisha prays and says, "Oh Lord, please open his eyes that he may see." I just wish I could have that in my life, right?
To see the angels of God around you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty awesome.
Yeah, a mountain full of horses and chariots of fire all around, knowing that they're there just to protect me. I mean, that would be amazing.
Yep.
And also, I just love the way that this happens, because I think it's the funniest way to get rid of a war. Elisha prays then that the people are struck with blindness. He leads them into the middle of the town in Samaria, and then they have a big feast. He prays that their eyes are opened, and then they have a big feast, and the soldiers all go home, and they don't attack Israel again. They say, "Things are too weird over there. We can't do that."
Yep. So how far are we now?
I mean, we're through chapter 6.
Okay.
And then in chapter 6, I think, this is a terrible story. The king of Syria then dies, and there's a new king, and he's going to siege Samaria and Israel. And he seizes them so much that you could take just some poop from a pigeon, and you could earn 5 shekels of silver for it. This pretty large amount of silver for some pigeon poop, because people are so hungry. And, people are so hungry that these women are bartering with each other. Yeah. And they're saying, we'll trade. Today, we'll boil your kid. Tomorrow, we'll boil my kid. And, what happens is the second day, the person whose kid is supposed to be boiled to be eaten, she's hidden her child. Yeah. And the first woman comes to the king and complains. And the king is of course sad. He tears off his clothes, and he goes to ask Elisha for food, and Elisha is able to promise them food. He delivers this promise that there's going to be so much food that it's going to be so cheap to buy food now. And I like the way that miracle happens too, because the Syrians are just in their camp, and they just hear what they think are chariots and men and armies coming towards them, and they run away, and they leave all their food, and the Israelites go into their camps and take all their food for nothing.
And I like how that's how it's discovered.
Yeah.
These 4 lepers that can't go into the camp of the Israelites decide, well, let's just risk it and go see if we can get food in the camp of our enemy, and there's nobody there. And then they say, maybe we shouldn't keep this to ourselves. Mm-hmm. Let's go tell the people, and that's how this all unfolds.
Yeah, in a book about kings, right? I mean, that's in the name, 2 Kings. The heroes are often not the kings, right?
Yep.
They are the disenfranchised, the people who have been cast out of society. And, that's those lepers who can't even go into town.
So we get into chapter 8, and we come back to the Shunammite.
Yeah, this woman whose son had been revived, and
who had left during a famine, and now she comes back, and they're going to restore her land. And Elisha is going to start, and a whole series of kings are going to end up being cursed, and we have a couple of themes that keep running through. I think most of 2 Kings. First of all, the Lord was not willing to destroy Judah for the sake of David, his servants.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is how many of the kings followed after the sins of Jeroboam.
Yeah.
Jeroboam had an incredible impact because, man, people kept going back to the evil stuff that he did.
Yeah, one of these early kings of Israel, right?
Yep.
And, yeah, it is amazing. He clearly set up things well for people to follow in his footsteps, but his footsteps were not good footsteps to follow in.
Right. So then we run through a bunch of kings. Chapter 9, we got Jehu and Jehoram, and Jehu assassinates Ahaziah. Jezebel is slain.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's judgment on Ahab's house, and Jehu actually destroys Baal worshippers, and this is chapter 10. But again, they didn't destroy the high places, and because of that, people continued to offer sacrifices there.
Yeah, it seems like there are a few different types of kings that show up. There are these kings that are just evil. They just do what is wrong in the eyes of the Lord and, provoke the Lord to anger. And then there are these kings that do what is right in the eyes of the Lord, but there's always a but for these kings, that they did what was right, but they didn't destroy the high places. But, like Solomon, he built up these, statues and idols to other gods, but they still burnt their son in the fire.
And Jehu is an interesting one because he destroys the Baal worshippers, and he tricks them all come together and he destroys them. But then we end with Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, which he made Israel sin.
Yeah.
It just a lot of frustration with people that do pretty good but don't complete it.
Right.
Well, chapter 11 has an interesting start, didn't you think?
Yeah.
Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead. She rose and destroyed all the royal offspring. And then, now one is actually saved, and we'll get to that later perhaps, because he was hidden from her. But Athaliah was reigning as the ruler of Israel.
Yeah.
The only queen of Israel, although they don't call her queen, but she ruled in Israel for a period of about 7 years, I think is what it was.
She rules in Judah, right? Because Ahaziah was the ruler of Judah.
Yes, she was the queen of Judah.
So now we have, still throughout this whole book, is these conflating paths, right? How is Israel going and how is Judah going? Israel is these 10 tribes. It never names them for us, is something I noticed.
Right.
So for me, there's the question of, what are these 10 tribes? Presumably, it's just not including Levi. That's my best guess. Because then Judah is the tribe of Judah. And so I'm assuming that these 10 tribes are the other 10 brothers.
Right.
Including Joseph, which includes the half-tribe of Manasseh and the half-tribe of Ephraim. But it's not clear to me if that's
and
exactly
the other tribe, isn't that the tribe of Benjamin? So it's Judah and Benjamin as the two, and then the other 10 tribes are the other 10 tribes.
I thought that just because Levi doesn't get an inheritance of land, that he's not counted in these other 10 tribes. So there's the Levites who are just around everywhere. the 10 tribes and then the one tribe of Judah.
That could be.
But I don't know.
I could be wrong.
It doesn't tell us.
Right.
Or as far as I could tell. I mean, reading specifically looking for it, but not reading like as a study for it.
Right.
That was my understanding. But it could be something different. And maybe we'll see something different in First and Second Chronicles, and that'll clear that up for us. But I don't know. That was, I guess, a question I had. So, according to you, the guy who knows a lot more than me, you think it's Judah and Benjamin, and then the other 10 tribes.
That's just because that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Not, I would have to go back and study it and say, wait, is that true? So, again, we're just two guys talking about Scripture when we read it, and it's in some ways it's hard not to project ourselves into it and things that we've assumed. And
it's hard too because this is the type of story that you want to project yourself into. You want to see yourself, okay, what if I was the king of Judah? What would I do? What if I was the king of Israel? What would I do? Would I be evil? Would I follow in my father's footsteps? What would my father have done? If my father was evil, would I have followed him? And I think that's part of the idea of this too, is that you're supposed to be projecting yourself into the story and reading it and, taking this to heart the way Josiah does, right? Josiah reads this, he finds the law of Israel and decides he wants to change and be good. And for me, a big theme I saw was, they're not following God's law, right? And it seems like as a Christian, it's easy to read the New Testament and especially the Gospels and think, wow, those Pharisees sucked. Why were they so into those laws? And what's the deal with that? And, reading this, it's easy to think, like, wow, we should follow the laws, like, do extra for the laws. And, it gave me some sympathy for these, more orthodox Pharisees that were wanting to follow the laws exactly.
Yeah. We have Athaliah, and she serves about 7 years. At least Jehoash was 7 years old when he became king. We don't actually know how old he was when he was hidden from Athaliah destroying the rest of his siblings. But then we have Joash rules over Judah, and it says that Jehoash did right in the sight of the Lord all his days, in which Jehoiada the priest instructed him. Only the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places.
Yeah.
And he goes on, and some of it is there's confusion here because of names. And sometimes it seems that like Joash is also Jehoash.
Right.
So during his reign, they repair the temple. And they start repairing the temple, but they tell the priest, repair the temple, but then they don't do it.
Yeah.
And then they come back and say, hey, how come you haven't repaired it? And eventually get to it, and I like what they said in verse 15. They did not require an accounting from the men into whose hands they gave the money to pay to those who did the work, for they dealt faithfully. And there's another place in our text where it says that same thing. They knew they had put it into the hands of people they could trust.
Yeah. And it is interesting, like chapter 12 ends with the death of Joash, and my Bible has a footnote that says Joash is Jehoash, but it's interesting because it's not a linear history either, because it's, chapter 12 ends with the death of Joash, but then Jehoaz reigns in chapter 13, and then at the verse 10 of chapter 13, Joash is the king of Judah still.
Yeah, and part of that is because they're interfacing the history of Israel with the history of Judah, and they overlap. And so it often says he was a king during the reign of this king. So that's part of the where we get that. Wait, are we going back now?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. We go back and forth.
Yeah, which makes it really hard to follow when we're thinking of history or time linearly, it makes it hard without drawing a map or something.
Right.
To say, okay, Jehoash was 7 years old and he starts reigning and he reigns for 40 years. Okay, and then in the 37th year of Joash, Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, began to reign.
Right. Now there are some people that have gone to the work of putting those the kings in chronological order and side by side. And if that's important to you, you can sure find that online. It's just not that important to me. More important to me is the overall message of Second Kings, which again is mankind is faulty. We, even the best of us, seem to always mess up, and God continues to care for us.
Yeah. And especially it seems like, Second Kings comes to the fall of Israel and the fall of Judah.
Yep.
And it's just the way that people are becoming more and more evil, and God is stepping further and further back. He's saying, I'm not going to bless you guys anymore. There's going to be more evil things. All the battles you were winning, you were winning them because of me, and I'm not going to help you win battles anymore.
Right. Interesting, in chapter 13, verse 5, the Lord gave Israel a deliverer so that they escaped from under the hand of the Arameans.
Yeah.
This is a judge, a deliverer that is unnamed. And that's it. That's the only verse that talks about him. Because right after that it says, nevertheless, they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam.
Yeah.
Okay, God delivers them, and they don't learn. They don't change.
Yeah, and that's, it happens a lot more. At the end of all of these kings, basically it says, and the prophets spoke and told them to follow in the ways of the Lord, and they did not listen, and they followed in the sins. They did not depart from the sins of the house of Jeroboam. They did not depart from the sins of Ahab.
Yep. And in chapter 13, Elisha dies.
Mm-hmm.
Elisha dies and he's buried, and then they have this really interesting story. As they were burying a different man, behold, they saw a marauding band, and they cast the dead man into the grave of Elisha. And when the man touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood up on his feet.
Yeah.
I think I want to be buried in Elisha's grave.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, depending on how old you are, I don't want you to be. It seems scary.
I think it would be scary if at any time, your body touched someone who was confirmed dead and buried, and you rose again.
Yeah, but that does show, of course, the great spirit of the Lord that was in Elisha.
Yeah.
That Elisha, has this great healing power that the Lord is working through him, and the Lord wants to heal people and keep them alive, and in the Lord's presence, they will stay alive.
Right. So what we run through for a number of chapters here is a repeat story. A king comes and he does evil. Sometimes they do a little bit of good, but they don't get rid of the high places and the altars, and
they keep the Asherah in Samaria.
And so they restore order to Israel, and then they mess up again. It's just so consistent.
Yeah.
And of course, so is the rest of the Acts. Aren't they written in?
Yeah. Every time also it says, now the rest of the deeds, weren't they in the book of Chronicles?
Yep.
So maybe over the next couple of days as we're reading Chronicles, we'll see, Pekahiah, yes, his acts. I remember. We were supposed to read about his acts. Well, we're doing it now. But of course, it keeps this trend going. People reigning in Israel, people reigning in Judah. And I just think it's amazing how young some of these guys are when they start reigning.
Some of them 16, some of them 20.
Some of them 7, some of them 3. I think for that, to me, it always lists off who the person is, but then also who their mother was.
Yeah.
And I think, there's some historical precedent, as far as I understand, that's just a way of showing who their family is, who their genealogy is, but I think it also is a show of like who they are listening to, who they, if your 7-year-old is starting to reign as king, probably he has people that are kind of taking up the mantle for him.
Right.
Because if you've ever met a 7-year-old, they're going to be a terrible king.
But there'll be lots of ice cream in the land.
Yeah, perhaps.
So we go through in chapter 15, 16, and into 17. We just have all these different kings. So Zechariah, Manachiah, Pekahiah, Pekah, Jotham, Ahaz, and their battles, and we just run through these fairly quickly. And so the next thing I wrote down was in chapter 17. The Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and every seer, saying, "Turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments, my statutes, according to all the laws which I commanded your fathers, in which I sent you through my servants the prophets." However, they did not listen.
Yeah, but they were stubborn as their fathers had been.
Yeah.
Who did not believe in the Lord their God.
God periodically sends people to bring revival.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still true today.
Yeah.
There are still people who get the attention of many in the land, and many will turn, but overall people have stiff necks and they don't listen.
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is now the fall of Israel now. There's no more kings of Israel that are mentioned. And to be fair, none of the kings of Israel that were mentioned did good. Every single time it says that a king did good or did what was good in the sight of the Lord, it was a king of Judah. Did you notice that?
I didn't, but once you said that, yes, that's true.
So, I mean, that's what I was noticing, especially as Hezekiah came. I just, something I remembered, or thought I had remembered, was that Hezekiah was a good king.
Yep.
And then when I got to chapter 18, where Hezekiah is, reading through it, I was like, wait, Hezekiah is reigning in Judah. Now there's no more Israel. I'm just wondering, I go back and check. Okay, none of the guys who did good were in Israel.
Yeah. And that's from the very beginning. Jeroboam, the first king of Israel, set the pattern, which is why we keep coming back to, and they continued in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat.
And a bunch of the kings of Judah do also follow in the sins of Jeroboam.
Right.
Or it says they follow in the sins of their brothers in Israel, or however it wants to say it that time. But
yep, I like what it says about Hezekiah in chapter 18:3 and following. He did right in the sight of the Lord, according to all his father David had done. He removed the high places, broke down the sacred pillars, and cut down the Asherah. He broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for until those days the sons of Israel burned incense to it, and it was called Nehushtan. He trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so that after him there was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor among those who were before him. For he clung to the Lord. He did not depart from following him, but kept his commandments, which the Lord had commanded Moses. We're going to have a tension on that, because later on you're going to talk about Josiah and what it says about Josiah.
Which maybe I just remembered wrong, because maybe I just remembered this about Hezekiah and thought it was about Josiah. So when we move forwards, we can look at that. But now it's interesting. Hezekiah has taken down the high places finally, right?
Yep.
And the very next thing that happens is the Sennacherib will attack Judah. And they send messengers ahead. And they say, "We see you took down your high places. Don't you know that we also worship the Lord your God? And he told us that we were going to destroy you. And now you're not even offering sacrifices to him in the high places. Of course he's going to give you up into our hands." And Hezekiah is holding fast to the word of the Lord. And he asks Isaiah, which I believe is the Isaiah that wrote the book of Isaiah.
It is.
It says Isaiah the son of Amos. And
just so you know, I looked that up to make sure.
Yeah.
And I forget where it is. I guess I didn't mark it, but did you notice Jonah was mentioned here also?
I did. I noticed
And yes, it's the same Jonah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so Isaiah is going to come and talk to Hezekiah and encourage him.
Mm-hmm.
And, whoa, look at that. God rescues Israel.
Yeah.
When you follow God, good things happen.
Mm-hmm. I just thought it was interesting that so far every king has not torn down the high places, right? And now Hezekiah does it, and the very first thing that happens is the surrounding people try to leverage that against him, leverage
Right.
the people against him, and say, you tore down the high places, to the ones that people were worshiping your God. Now he's definitely not going to save you. But it turns out that these people are lying, or they're testing the people of Israel,
Right.
sent by the Lord to test them. But it's interesting that how hard it is to follow God, that you want to follow God. And these other kings, they did what was right in the sight of the Lord, but didn't take down the high places. They probably had these other kingdoms around them that were saying, oh, look, they're doing what's right in the eyes of the Lord. They even kept the high places.
Yep.
And
the reality is there's always a squirrel to distract us.
yeah,
Squirrel.
We saw that with Elijah too, and I think also Elisha, where the people around them are saying, you're doing evil things. Jezebel,
Yep.
says, you're so evil, I'm going to kill you, and if I don't, let it be worse done to me. And Elijah goes and he cries in the wilderness and says...
It almost works for Elijah,
Yeah.
against Elijah.
So, and it works against Hezekiah too, right? He's so upset, and he needs the prophet from God. He needs Isaiah to comfort him, to reassure him, to say, don't worry, I know it's scary,
Right.
but God is with you.
And in a dramatic way, because Hezekiah gets sick, and the prophet Isaiah comes to him, and says that because Hezekiah turned to the Lord,
Yeah.
turned to God, God was going to give him 15 more years of life, and then bad things were going to happen in Judah after Hezekiah dies.
Right. And I thought it was interesting what Hezekiah has to say about that. In verse 19, he says, the word of the Lord that you have spoken is good, for he thought, why not, if there will be peace and security in my days?
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting because Hezekiah was this good king who was following in the ways of the Lord. In all ways, it says. He does all the things that God is commanding, and then his sort of reaction that his children are going to have bad things happen to them is, why not? If there's going to be peace and security while I'm around.
Yeah, at least I'll have peace.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which makes him seem like not a great father. And it also seems that way because of the way his children rule. But it just makes him seem like not a very good father.
It seems like a lot of the kings, David, I mean, he's got Absalom to deal with.
Yeah.
And even Solomon, in all his wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
they don't seem to be able to communicate to the next generation the call for holiness.
Yeah. And, maybe part of that is there's a difficulty in raising children if you have, 700 wives and 300 concubines.
Yeah.
If, that's the story of Bathsheba, is David already has so many women that he can be with and so many sons. Does he need to take Bathsheba away from Uriah?
Right.
And maybe it's just hard to raise a good son if you have, 1,500 sons or whatever.
Yeah. So things are going to fall apart now. Hezekiah dies, Manasseh becomes king, and he does things which are abominable. He practiced witchcraft, used divination, dealt with mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. He carved an image of the Asherah. That's chapter 21.
Yeah, he rebuilds all the stuff his dad had just torn down.
Yeah, which again turns God's away from Israel, or from Judah.
Mm-hmm.
But Manasseh dies, and Ammon becomes king, only reigns for 2 years, and then Josiah
Yeah.
becomes king.
And it's interesting, starts as king at 8 years old.
Yep.
And his mother's name was Jedidah,
And
the daughter of Adiah of Bozkath.
and right away he did right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in all the way of his father David, nor did he turn aside to the right or to the left, which is pretty cool. So he's got support. Presumably his mother and Hilkiah, the high priest.
Yeah.
And so we get to chapter 22, verse 11. Hilkiah has found a book of the law.
Yeah.
And
I'm thinking it might be from the Ark of the Covenant, which, at this point is not being mentioned at all, right?
right.
But we know that the law was in there, right? So that's my thought. It might be from something else. But it just says, I found the book of the law in the house of the Lord, in verse 8.
It's a good place to find the book of the law.
Mm-hmm.
But you probably ought to have them at your house, too.
Yeah.
Because we have access to them.
Yeah. We haven't been counting, right? I've not been adding up all the years of reign and how long things are going. But it's been a while now since, since David, since Moses, definitely.
Well, since Solomon building the temple, the house of the Lord. And I actually don't think it was in the Ark of the Covenant. I think it was because there's no indication of that, and the only time we're told what was in the Ark of the Covenant is the tablets of the Ten Commandments, which wouldn't qualify as a book of the law. Although
I thought that's how it's described, but maybe I'm wrong.
But anyway,
Anyways, it is a law,
right?
Whether it's the original version or a copy or whatever else.
And they bring it to Josiah, and they read it to him. And when he hears it, he tore his clothes, which is a sign of humility and also perhaps fear.
Yeah.
That, oh no, what's going to happen now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. David's wife didn't like it when he showed a little bit of ankle. How much more would she have hated it when he tore his clothes, right?
Right.
And now it's this total shame over your whole body that nothing is covered.
So this is going to be the beginning of Josiah putting into practice good, and so he has this covenant. He gets everybody to basically commit to following God, and he has a whole host of reforms.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. It seems like the people who are good at following God, their first instinct in any situation is, let's go ask.
Yeah. And
the people who are not good at following God, that is not their first instinct. Their first instinct is, I'm going to do whatever I want. And so I just like that Josiah's instinct is like, okay, we just read the law. It was terrible. Like, that was a horrible thing to read. We've not been doing that at all. So he goes and asks, Hilkiah the priest and these other people, go ask God. See what we should do.
Yep. And did you notice who ultimately speaks? Huldah the prophetess.
Yeah.
So here's another woman who has a significant part in Israel. And the prophetess says, bad things are going to happen, but because your heart was tender and you humbled yourself before the Lord when you heard what I spoke against this place and against its inhabitants, you've torn your clothes and wept before me. I have heard you, declares the Lord, and I will gather you to your fathers, and you will be gathered to your grave in peace, and your eyes will not see all the evil which I will bring to this place.
Yeah.
Josiah has this promise. Because you responded appropriately to God's word, you will live out your days in peace.
What does your verse 19 say?
Because your heart was tender, and you humbled yourself before the Lord when you heard what I spoke against this place and against its inhabitants, that you should become a desolation and a curse, that they should become a desolation and a curse. Is that what you wanted? I wanted
your heart was tender. Mine says, because your heart was penitent, which I guess is a little bit of a different word. But,
yeah.
I don't know.
So Josiah takes it to heart, and we see all of chapter 23. He is reforming Israel, and he cuts down the high places, and he calls people back to faith in God and to practice. And I really liked verse 22 because he's now reinstated the Passover.
Yeah.
And it says, surely such a Passover had not been celebrated from the days of the judges who judged Israel, nor in the days of all the kings of Israel and of the kings of Judah.
Yeah. So David, the man after God's own heart, didn't celebrate the Passover. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, didn't celebrate the Passover. That's what I wanted to. Yeah, I wondered what yours said. Mine says, for no such Passover had been kept since the days of the judges. It's just an amazing thing that this, a random king that, probably you've never heard of Josiah, or, maybe you know very little of him.
You've heard of David, and maybe you've heard of Josiah, but if you had to say who was the better king, you would almost always say, well, it's David.
Yeah.
He did greater things. But then listen to what the scripture says about Josiah. This is in 2 Kings 23, verse 25. Before him there was no king like him, who turned to the Lord with all his heart, and with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, nor did any like him arise after him.
Yeah.
There was no king like Josiah.
Now I want to compare, because you were right that Hezekiah is described in a similar way, but it is different, right?
Yeah. So we have these two really great kings that are faithful to God, but right after both of them, it falls apart. People just don't really like following God.
Yeah, it's interesting. Mine says Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so that there was none like him among all the kings of Judah after him, nor among those who were before him. So Hezekiah has this trust in the Lord, and Josiah has
turned to the Lord.
Has turned to the Lord with all his heart, soul, and might. Just an interesting comparison of what the sorts of things they did or the way that they believed. And it's interesting because they're so near the end of Judah.
Yep.
There's now 3 more kings: Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah. Right?
Jehoaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah.
You're right. I didn't count Jehoiahaz because he reigns for 3 months and basically is immediately killed by Pharaoh.
Right.
Pharaoh does not like Jehoiahaz because he won't give him everything. And so he puts in Jehoiakim. One thing I noticed it in these last couple of chapters, 23:34, Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king in the place of Josiah his father, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. And then the next verse, and Jehoiakim gave the silver and gold to Pharaoh. So Pharaoh is able to, we talked about this before with Naomi, right? Naomi tries to change her name from pleasant to Mara, to bitter. And it doesn't stick. The next verse talks about Naomi again. But here, Pharaoh is able to change Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim, and I don't know what Eliakim or Jehoiakim mean, but from my basic understanding is this Eli would be used for God, and so now they've changed his name from God-akim to Jehoiakim, which I just thought was interesting. And then Jehoiakim's not a good king.
Right. As a matter of fact, you have these other kings. You have Jehoaz, only 3 months, but he did evil in the sight of the Lord. You have Jehoiakim, and it says he did evil in the sight of the Lord. Mm-hmm. You have Jehoiachin, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. And then you have Zedekiah made the king, and I wonder what he's going to do.
Evil in the sight of the Lord.
Yep.
According to all that Jehoiakim had done. So I just thought it's interesting too. Now they're, not being evil according to what Jeroboam did, but for these few kings, these 4 kings or whatever, they're being evil in light of what Jehoiakim did,
Right.
and how he led the people. So Josiah was this great king, and there was nobody like him who turned to God with all his heart, soul, and might. And then his sons also are the people that are turning away from God, and now there's a whole new line of sin.
Yep. And then the result ultimately is Nebuchadnezzar comes and besieges Israel. Jerusalem takes a few years, but Jerusalem falls, and the Israelites are taken into captivity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where 2 Kings end. The people are in captivity, and eventually we're going to pick that back up and find out at least some of the things that happen under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar while the people of Israel are in captivity.
Yeah, and it's interesting because for me, what I'm thinking, reading to the end of this, is, it's so sad, right? But I'm thinking, okay, there's this promise to David that that God will keep his name in the house forever, and it uses this word forever multiple times, that
Right.
For forever the line of David will have God in it in some way. And so it just has me thinking, how is this going to work out? I know how it works out coming up to Matthew, right?
Right.
But for me, in my Bible, there's this much between now the house of Judah is dead to Jesus is born. So what's going on?
Well, a lot of that, though, is you recognize is actually taking place during this same time period. So you have the prophet Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and the minor prophets are all taking place during the kings of Israel. So even though there's a lot of pages there, you have 150 songs included there. So the real issue ultimately comes after Malachi, in the 400 years of silence,
right?
And that's that's where the rubber hits the road of what happened in that time period. And in that time period, apparently the Israelites, the Jewish people, were keeping track of the tribes, and so they still understood when it comes to the birth of Jesus that he was in the line of David.
Yeah,
pretty amazing stuff.
And it's interesting too because it's still this line of Abraham, to whom God has promised the people of Abraham would be a light unto the world.
Right.
So,
and when we get into First Chronicles, we're going to see some of that genealogy stuff, because the first 8 chapters of First Chronicles are genealogies. It's this person had this person, and so the people of God, the people of Israel or Judah,
they're trying to keep track.
Yeah, they did, and so the story doesn't end in Second Kings, and we have some more details and different types of details in First Chronicles, which we're going to get to tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think I'm done for the day.
Yeah, I guess I do have just one question. Why are all these kings evil? And what are we supposed to learn about God from this?
Well, I think we learn that God is true to his word, that back when Samuel was the prophet in Israel, and the Israelites said, we want a king so we can be like the nations around us. And God said, you don't know what you're asking. It's going to end up bad. What we see is that God was right, and that it is not wise for us to trust in kings. Because kings are almost always filled with the fallenness of mankind. And they have great power, and therefore they're able to have great evil.
Yeah, and even the good ones, they don't save Israel, right?
Yep.
They don't save Israel for all of time.
And nobody ever saves Israel. It's always God who saves Israel, which is a lesson for us. we think, oh, if we just elect the right president, things will be better. No, if we turn to God, things get better.
Right.
So I think that's part of the issue of Second Kings, that it's not in our best interest to trust in kings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. That's very well said.
All right. Well, God bless. We'll see you tomorrow.